Ahead and get started with this morning's meeting of the Tacoma-Pierce County Coalition to End Homelessness. Rosemary, how will you inspire us this morning?
Good morning.
If I unmute myself, I might be able to do a better job. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our open table, where we learn from each other with respect and take up the ongoing challenge to end homelessness in Pierce County. As we meet virtually from multiple places in the region of the Salish Sea and Mount Tahoma, we acknowledge our debt to the continuing stewardship of the earth and its waters by the native peoples of the Salish Sea, especially the Puyallup tribe of Indians. This stewardship is even more important given a decision of the Supreme Court yesterday that struck down current environmental regulations that protect half of U.S. wetlands from development intrusions. Protecting the earth's waters remains an essential stewardship act. We're close to the end of May, which is celebrated as Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month, and we also celebrate Memorial Day on Monday. So what might these two remembrances have to say about the work we do here together? Just a little context. Memorial Day was originally called Decoration Day. It started after the Civil War as a time to bring flowers to Union soldiers' graves, and it has become a time to honor all who died in this country's wars. For many today, this holiday is now primarily a time to mark the beginning of summer and a time to entice consumers for sales. Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month was designated in 1992 by President George H.W. Bush to honor the many contributions and accomplishments of Asian Americans, Pacific Islanders, and Native Hawaiians. Honoring the contribution of our diversity of heritage is an important tradition, especially when so much in the dominant story fails to recognize these accomplishments. As I tried to connect these two honorings, I came upon the history of the 442nd World War II Regimental Combat Team, comprised primarily of Nisei or second-generation Japanese Americans from Hawaii and the West Coast. I'm not a student of military history, though, like many of you, I remember my high school history being primarily a story of how we moved from one war to the next. So for any veterans here, apologize for not having things quite right, perhaps. But this 442nd unit became the most heavily decorated unit for its size and length of service in the history of the United States Army, as well as one of the units with the highest casualty rates. Many of the soldiers from the continental United States had families in internment camps while they fought abroad. They'd initially been categorized as 4C, enemy alien, and were not subject to the draft. Instead, they answered a call to a segregated combat unit that would serve in Europe. The lists of their service awards and honors is quite lengthy and amazing, but all of this did not protect them from having to fight a battle at home for the right to be treated as full citizens. The motto of the Regimental Combat Team was "Go for broke." I'll know more about that in a minute. After the war, many Nisei veterans had difficulty finding housing in the continental United States. Their homes, which they had to abandon during the government-imposed internment, were occupied by new tenants. Due to the housing shortage, many of these veterans turned to federal housing programs, and many also used the GI Bill as an opportunity to attend university, become doctors, dentists, architects, scientists, engineers, teachers. These careers are precisely the kinds of contributions and accomplishments that are honored during this Heritage Month. And today, though, to center us on our work, I'm drawn to the motto of the 442nd, "Go for broke." In Hawaii, this was a slang term referring to gamblers being all in, wagering everything on a big win, putting in all you had as your stake in the result, and knowing that you would be bankrupt or broke if you lost. For the 442nd, their stake in proving their loyalty to a country that saw them as traitors by heritage was enormous, and many paid the ultimate price. Their stake in ending discrimination was no less monumental, and this offers a connection for us and for those surviving precariously on Pierce County streets, those who are going for broke every day in every way. We honor people who are resilient in responding to hardship and discrimination. We admire what's been achieved while dealing with soul-crushing poverty, or when faced with physical and emotional challenges, or when confronting dismissals based on gender or race or sexuality or age or housing status. What if we could say, you shouldn't have to be resilient? What if we demanded a world where resilience was not required as a condition of being able to live in peace, develop one's gifts, and feel entitled to belong? Clearly, the 442nd's motto, "Go for broke," embraces the challenges of resilience, but it also recognizes that even a rigged game has vulnerabilities that can be exploited. and sometimes we do win. We join together here each week to assess our chances, to learn from those who have the lived experience to count the costs, and in support of the right to housing, to go for broke together. Welcome to our work. So good morning again. One of my jobs here at the beginning is to remind us and to introduce new people to the norms of our time together. And we just ask that you mute yourself when you're not talking, that you use the Zoom's raised hand feature if you have something to say and be in line for that. To limit distractions by turning off your camera if you need to take another call or do something else. And to use the chat to share information, make announcements, and contribute to the discussion. Recognizing that the chat is a public document that's publicized on our website. So know that that will be there. And if you have comments to make to individuals, those private conversations will not be public. So you can do that with any of the folks on the call. We also have a number of community norms for how we talk when we're together. And at the steering committee over the past couple of weeks, we've thought about featuring one of these perhaps each time so we can be reminded of ourselves as we participate. And I wanted just to pick the one that's called Be Aware of Power Dynamics, just briefly to say that we often think of this in a situation of who talks the most has the most power. That's sometimes true. Or who has the most, quote, authority, which we pick up when we sit around and look and think about each other. But we also have the power dynamics that are in our different statuses. Some of us have freedom to speak freely because we aren't subject to contracts or to employment status. So it's really important for us to think about how do we use the power we have in ways that advance our goals. So to be aware of that and to speak out when we can, when we have the freedom to do so, is really encouraged. So I think with that, I will see if we have any new folks. We ask people who join us or who've been away for a while just to say hello. This is not a time for a big introduction or announcements about things, but if you are part of a group and would like to share your group's offerings with our coalition, Teresa Power-Drudas organizes what we call spotlights that happen each week. And she'll put her information in the chat for you and you can contact her about that possibility. But if you're just here to find out a bit about us and to check us out or check out the situation or just listen in, this is a good time to say hello. Let us know who you are, and then you can also put your information in the chat. So if there's anyone who'd like to say that hello here, just raise your hand and be recognized. We'll greet you warmly. It'd be pretty sad if we didn't greet you warmly.
I'll say hi. I'm Amy McIntyre, and I'm from the Family Justice Center here in Pierce County.
Well, welcome, Amy. We're really glad to have the Justice Center represented. Hope you can join us more than today, but welcome today.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jane Upshaw. I'm a school social worker for Puyallup School District. I've been a few times, but I've been away, but I'm glad to be back, and it's good to see you.
Jane, welcome. It's wonderful to have people involved with the schools. It's really very good. Thank you.
I'm Salvador Rosario. I'm with Pre-Call Services down at Pierce County.
Wonderful, Salvador. Welcome very much.
Good morning. Lydia Colmenares from Tacoma Municipal Court with our new therapeutic court program.
Alyssa, I can't see you right now. I'm not on my screens. I want to say hello. Anyway, welcome. It's wonderful to have people from the court system here with us. All right, Rob, do you see anyone else? I can't see all the screens, but.
I am not seeing anyone else right now. So thank you, Rosemary, for introducing today's meeting and setting us on the right path. And if you haven't had a chance to introduce yourself or you don't want to do so verbally, you can do the same in the chat. And for anybody who's new, it's great to drop your contact information in the chat so that folks know how to get a hold of you. So thank you. And let's move on to our regular standing item that we start every week's meetings with, and that is to talk about what folks are seeing happening on the street this week. This week on the streets is a segment that is meant to be for an opportunity for folks to share where they're seeing needs for volunteer outreach. I do want to offer a quick reminder. We talked about this last week, but we want to tread a fine line where we can continue providing volunteer outreach to locations while also being sure to respect that, especially inside the city of Tacoma right now, many people who are homeless are trying to keep the location of their sites more hidden so that they will not be swept by City of Tacoma staff. So with that in mind, let's please refrain from mentioning the exact location of sites and focus on what changes you're seeing. Let's also refrain from talking about specific individuals. If you have a concern about a specific site, you can reach out to me by email, and a couple of other folks, I believe, are going to step up and be able to be references if you want to talk to somebody who is safe regarding a site or particular concern that is tied to a geography. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and get started. This is an opportunity to just share kind of what you're seeing. So anybody can raise their hand or use the raise hand function and I'll call on you. Yeah, Jeffrey, why don't you get us started?
I have seen campers moving up and down Pacific Avenue, mostly closer to the south end. This is pretty regular. I do see one gentleman pushing his cart all over the west side, mostly along Center Street and up Pearl, and a few people moving on Pearl south in the last 2 days. I have informed Richard where I have seen a couple of encampments, both of which are outside the boundaries of the city's camping ban. I have specifically checked for that. But there are 2 camps that I know of right now, and that's as much as I'll give you right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeffrey. Ryan, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I think we know, well, let me see. The HEAL team and, police and park enforcement were out at Volunteer Park or People's Park yesterday. Folks had gathered there with their stuff. And so they came and they showed up with their big trailer, like when they do for sweeps, to pick a bunch of stuff up. But the people there put everything on their carts and moved it all and were gone within an hour or so. And nothing went in the back of the truck. So it's good to see that the communities out there have adapted and they're mobile enough that they can avoid being swept and manage to hang on to their stuff and keep their communities intact. So I was talking to one of the police officers, and she knew of a gal that had 11 shopping carts and has moved all the way across the city. And she's like, yep, she takes 2 at a time, moves them a block, goes back until they're all grouped together, and then she goes another block. So very resilient and resourceful community out there. And, at least for a day, they managed to escape the city sweep.
Thank you, Ryan. Anyone else with things that they're observing or needs that they're observing? I will note just the obvious context. Today's forecast is supposed to have the temperatures going above 80 degrees. So it's a good reminder to carry some water in your car if you're out and about. People would definitely appreciate that in the heat. The good news is it looks like it's just going to be warm today. Go ahead, Jay.
Speaking from experience, when you get to the point where you're starting to pack up your stuff every day and move it, it is very important that our outreach and people that work with our community start asking, what do you need replaced? What can we replace? Like literally take the broken item away and give them something new that they need, whether that's storage bags or things like that in particular, because that's what's going to break down is plasticware that you contain your crap with. But if we don't start replacing their stuff, they're going to keep on holding on to what is broken and just adding it to bags. And it's a habitual thing. So start asking them, what do you need replaced that's been worn down or isn't working anymore? And it will really help them be able to move in a fashion that is necessary that shouldn't be happening. You shouldn't have to pick up your stuff in 5 minutes.
Yeah, thank you, Jay. Teresa?
Hi, from not so sunny Oregon. I just wanted to let you all know that traveling around the country, we're in such the same space as so many other places. And yet there are some innovative things going on, and I'm going to try to encourage some of the folks doing things in Vancouver and also in Eugene. Eugene was the most creative space I found of people trying to do different things around addressing homelessness than we are currently doing here. I don't know that they're doing it perfectly, but I think there are some things we could learn and possibly some things that we could share with them. So my goal is to get some of those folks to come to our meetings, and maybe we can come to some of their meetings, but cross-fertilization is a good thing. I did, though, coming up the coast, you get a sense sometimes that there are all these small coastal retirement communities or fishing communities and that they're not dealing with homelessness, but there's homelessness pretty much everywhere. And when I was in Crescent City yesterday, it was intense. So
they are.
There it is. I don't know if someone's talking to me or they just left their mic on. Anyway, I will also be back in touch with you about the tiny shelter accoutrement that we have asked for, and we're getting really close. So again, send me a text. I'll put my text in the chat again if you are interested in helping, even if you can't do a whole little tiny shelter but are interested in helping. I'll also post the flyer again. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Teresa. And Patricia?
I was going to go into a deeper dive about this, but I do think that maybe one day we should bring up about trauma and stuff. And the more trauma that happens, people collect stuff. And that stuff also, if they get housed, goes into the housing. So there's like a stop trigger situation. It's something to consider because that's a common theme. And also what is given to them, you know, is like a sense of worth. So there's like a boundary around them that they feel like their stuff protects them. So that's a whole bigger conversation, but I just sort of thought about that. Thank you.
Yeah,
So,
thank you, Patricia. And
Patricia,
ahead.
are you saying that we need to make sure we have mental health services for everyone who is homeless?
Hey, I'm just, I mean, that's part of, that's part of, I believe that mental and behavioral health services go hand in hand with homelessness, but also, yeah, that's getting complicated, but that really needs to be funded as well and be appropriate for the circumstances because the traumas build, like, and even with people like Ryan suggested with like 11 shopping carts, those shopping carts will be hard to be removed if somebody's offered housing. So like it becomes what I call a durable mindset, you know, how you're able to cope. And then, yeah, I mean, I'm right there with you, mental and behavioral health. And that's something also at a state level and what really that means. Is that talking to somebody? Is that deep diving into somebody? Is that changing somebody's worth, you know, to not just accept all the hygiene kits? Is it to accept what they really want and need versus just what they're given. I mean, this is a huge conversation, but yes, it goes hand in hand, and it needs to be appropriate in all ways to change the situation. And I think that speaks to, and I'm going to speak on this behalf, I do truly in my heart believe we can end street homelessness. The other parts are much bigger picture, but street homelessness, and when people are on the street, they're the ones that need the most mental and behavioral health, and they're the ones that are least getting it because they have no longer reached, they're no longer, most are no longer capable of being resilient to keep on going to the systems that are failing them and to keep on going back and just filling out paperwork but not getting the services that they maybe have a moment of clarity they need. And I'm going to leave it at that. Thank you for letting me share, everybody.
Ma'am.
Yeah, thank you, Patricia. And Jay, you had something to add?
I'm sorry, really quickly, the other thing I think people don't understand is a lack of empathy and understanding through experience is missing in our system. We have people that have never been homeless, never had serious strife, never had certain circumstances, trying to work with people that have inedible trauma from all of these damaging situations, but there's no connection point or communication. They just treat the anxiety, treat the PTSD, but because of no affiliated understanding or emotional set, because they've never been through it, they can't help them. And it really is a problem. So we need informed care for mental health with peer advocacy and peer counseling.
Thank you, Jay. Anyone else who would like to share a final item for this week on the streets? All right, well, thank you so much for the conversation and for paying close attention not to sharing too much information about sites that we're encountering. Again, I did drop my email address in the chat if someone is in the meeting and wants to inquire about a specific site location. Please use that. My email is rhuff@pchomeless.org. And with that being said, let's move on to the next item in the agenda. And this is just going to be a quick update. Usually at the end of a month like this, I would be encouraging folks to join a monthly meeting of the Pierce County, the Implementation Advisory Board for the Pierce County Comprehensive Plan to End Homelessness. I did want to let coalition members know that the advisory board is not going to meet on the first Friday of June, as they have done for the last couple of years. And the reason for that is that there's a recognition that after the vote was taken earlier this year on how the county should approach or should implement the unified regional approach. You'll remember there was a vote about that here earlier in the year, and that vote was that asked that the county establish a position in the executive's office with a person who is in charge of the issue of homelessness and coordinating the response across the region, aka the county, with some oversight from the continuum of care. So after that decision was made, the advisory board has kind of been in a little bit of a confused state, trying to decide what do we need to do next. And yes, Courtney, that decision was not unanimous. Courtney is also on the advisory board. She and I both voted against that particular decision, but we didn't prevail. So there was a meeting of the executive committee for the advisory board a couple of weeks ago. And at that executive committee meeting, it was decided that the June advisory board meeting would be canceled, and we will hold an advisory board meeting in July instead, toward the end of July. And that in the interim, the director of Pierce County Pierce County's Human Services Department has asked the county council for further direction of what they want the advisory board to do now that this decision has been made about the unified regional approach. There clearly is a shift to focus on strengthening and improving the continuum of care at the county level for Pierce County. And because of the decision that was made about the unified regional approach, there's a recognition that the COC needs to become much more vital to overseeing this unified regional approach. So there's a shift of energy to focus on the COC and away from the advisory board. So we should know soon, at least by the meeting in July, whether the advisory board is going to continue or whether that function that the advisory board has been fulfilling will shift in some way to the COC. So I just wanted to let folks know here what's happening with that. It is in the hands of the county council, and the county council is actually pursuing other options as well, as Sally has mentioned in the chat. So yeah, thank you for all the rigorous conversation in the chat as I'm droning on, but I just wanted to make the coalition aware of why there is not a meeting scheduled for the first Friday of June. Any questions that folks have before we move on? Yeah, Courtney, go ahead.
I just wanted to add a little bit about, I put it in the chat, but there are people who regret their votes now. And there was at least one person who was confused in their vote and didn't intend to vote that way. Sally mentions there are people in community trying to offer other suggestions. We paid a consultant to give us options, and the options that I'm seeing from community replicate the best option that was not voted on. So I just don't know where else to go except the COC at this point. There would have to be a riot at the advisory board meeting to I don't know, move to revote. I don't know, but it's a very interesting situation right now. And there's not much left for the advisory board to do. So, but the COC is not in a place to do the oversight yet. And there's no accountability measures. There's no shared power, for hirings or other things. So I'm quite concerned, and I'm not satisfied. And I think more people will die because of this vote than is necessary.
Yeah, thank you for that context, Courtney. And yeah, I just wanted to come here to the group this morning to tell folks where things sit. I'm not thrilled with where we're at either. But this is where we're at right now. Depending on what happens with the direction, I do think that the comprehensive plan to end homelessness, the plan itself, is a valuable piece of work. And it's something that to put into context, the coalition really was the trigger for creation of the comprehensive plan to end homelessness. So I feel a responsibility that we do whatever we can as a coalition to help the plan move forward and correct, directions if we don't like the direction something's moving forward, to advocate for moving in a better direction. So more to come. Just wanted to let folks know where things stand right now. Monique, go ahead.
I've seen the plan, but is it moving now? Is it in place, or is the work happening?
So it is, and I know a couple of months ago, I shared a PowerPoint. I can dig that up again, that shows the disposition of the progress on the different priorities. There have been a number of contracts that have been set up and projects that are moving forward that are all in the plan. There is still at least 2 large projects that have not yet been awarded, including the shelter hub. So that is still to come, but
So Rob, specifically, there's a section in there that talks about targeted outreach. So that's the one I'm really concerned about. Has something happened to start moving that targeted outreach for underserved populations?
Yeah, let me go look at the slides as I have a chance, and at the very least, I can send that to the mailing list after the meeting.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that.
Yeah, you're welcome. All right, and Sally, I do see your question in the chat about has the progress improved the lives of unhoused people? It certainly has not yet risen to meet the need. And none of this is happening as quickly as any of us want it to move. Also, I mean, I have to acknowledge funding is a challenge. Many of the things that are in the comprehensive plan to end homelessness rely on one-time funding that comes through either that came through either the CARES Act or the American Rescue Plan Act funding related to COVID, and those dollars will run out. So one-time funding for things that we're hoping will be ongoing programs is a challenge. And so that's something that we're going to be facing as this year continues as well. And Monique, did you have another question or just hadn't had your hand down
Sorry.
yet? No problem. No problem.
So in Los Angeles, the mayor has gotten like a couple of $1 billion to work with homelessness. Do we know where she got that from?
So are you talking about the funding that's coming through the new initiative through the usage focus on the All Inside program? So it's brand new funding?
Maybe I should have looked it up before I asked the question.
Yeah.
I have no idea. I just know that there's a lot of money going around out here. And I mean, they've cleaned the streets, put people in hotels like quickly.
Yeah, as Mark mentions in the chat, there was a vote a couple of years ago for folks in LA to tax themselves to create more funding for homeless services and also for affordable housing. So that may be part of the funding that you're talking about, but I know that California is receiving funding through the All Inside program, just like Seattle is. And that was something that was announced just last week by the Biden administration. All right. And I have to admit, you guys are putting a lot of good information in the chat. I can't follow it and run the meeting. So if anything rises up to the level where you want to speak it, please just raise your hand and let me know and we can continue. I do know we have 2 presentations to get started with now. So I don't want to belabor this point, but if there's something critical, I'm happy to allow you to voice it. All right. So let's move on to our next item in the agenda. And that is one of the areas that we know that is a challenge in Pierce County that we have not yet risen to meet, and that is how to deal with the issue of folks not having safe parking sites to allow RVs and campers. And so I will hand this over to Jeffrey, who's going to talk, along with Bill Curlin. Bill Curlin Hackett, thank you for joining the meeting. And share a little bit about what's happening in other counties and maybe where we can go here. So Jeffrey, why don't you get us started?
Good morning, everyone. RVs have risen to the need for us to talk and start thinking about how we're going to address that. The problem with RVs is they have a little more infrastructure you have to work with. And nobody has really wanted to take that on. I did have a conversation with Catherine Ishka a year and a half ago in regards to RVs. And, but she's currently out of commission due to some medical issues. And I have not been able to communicate with her recently about that. In the meantime, I did ask Bill Curlin to join us because he's been working with the RVs in Seattle for a couple of years now. And maybe he can bring some of his insight to what we can do. Okay, Bill, you have the floor.
Yeah, a couple of years since 2011. Thanks, Jeffrey. Although to qualify that, the public funding did not attach to it until late 2020. So the systems, the electeds, the staff in the public sector all have overlooked people living in vehicles for a long time. So this is a generation's failure on the part of all of us. And it is time to reverse that. I was at the public meeting for the RV Safe Lot in Seattle last night. I'll get the presentation materials from Low Income Housing Institute, who are the hosts, and I'll forward those to Jeffrey. He can share them with you. It includes things like a code of conduct and other parameters of how they'll do it. One of the telling things, of course, that continues is that the public's view of it is all based on their own little anecdotes and opinions. And that came close to souring the meeting. In a way, I think at one point I wasn't formally supposed to be on the agenda, but it became clear that the agenda needed help. And I had to put the whole effort into the context of it being part of the regional authority, which it is. And that what we were there for last night was inquiry and not charge. And by that, I mean not standing up at the microphone and charging everybody with all the problems that they have been seeing. So the public sector obviously sees its own evidence, and that works against everybody pretty much. So the RV Safe Lot's going to start in Seattle. Finally, it's about 2.5 years delayed, even a year delayed on the regional plan. It's going to have 30 RVs and 10 tiny homes on the same site. So that's Lehigh's innovation. It was not part of the plan. But one of the things that will help is that out of the regional plan, we started a vehicle residency work group. Now that group's been meeting for 2.5 years. And that group, just by force of our personalities, is taking over the narrative, I'll say it that way, in terms of getting these things done and presenting innovations like on-street safe zones, which is, we're close to the cusp of being able to do that. In other words, using the space on the right-of-way for 5 to 6 RVs and putting all the bells and whistles attaching to them, code of conduct and everything else, to expand the number of outreach efforts to people in RVs to move them into housing or into some other safer situation. So in part, I think it's good that maybe there are not historic pathways and protocols already established. We get to establish them because it's hard to break the old patterns. And since they've ignored it entirely, we get to set new innovations and make better use of money. As you may know and have heard, this mayor in Seattle is sweeping more than any of the 3 prior mayors. And that means more impounds. I've done public record requests to find out how many impounds we're actually having. And I'm narrowing that down. One number I've seen that includes everybody, not just including the lived in, has been averaging around 50 to 60 a week. Now, even if I took half of those as being lived in vehicles, that's intolerable. That's completely the wrong direction because we put those people back on the street. So finding safe places off the street, I'm working with the King County assessor. I might challenge this group to work with your county assessor for vacant public property that could be used. Some of that is private property, like we have a former Sam's Club up on Aurora above 130th that's in the hands of a financial institution that doesn't have any plans for it. And we may even be able to talk about using properties like that for term periods of a year or 2 years. So I think one of the things that I'm trying to point out is that innovation is your friend. Public officials need to understand that this is not a micromanageable problem for them. They need to trust experts like you folks. And even getting them to trust the regional authority up in King County is not easy. So I think that's one of the first things I would say is don't be afraid to innovate. And I mean, I am not even up to speed on what Thurston County is doing now. They've had a number of efforts, and maybe Jeffrey can fill in on that. But also at the same time, and Jeffrey and I meet regularly, and one of the things that still has to happen is for the state to get better involved. So some of the things have to come out of the state because of the RCW and the control of the right-of-way and the control of impound law and so many other pieces, because there is still a large amount of criminalization from the public sector happening that interferes with this work. So we have lists that I can send, like protocols A through P of ways to do the on-street innovation. I've asked for Lehigh, as I said, I didn't pick up the paperwork Lehigh gave out last night, but I've asked for copies of it. So we can forward that to see what a formal RV safe lot would look like. And it's still in process. They're willing to keep amending their code of conduct and other things like that. There's other bells and whistles attaching to that, like the city of Seattle said it would be willing to create a safe storage lot for people who abandon their RV but still want to keep it for a while to store things, you know, instead of buying a storage unit. That's another idea that's out there, and these have made their way to the executive office in Seattle. And I bring it up that way because I think the thing I should have started with is vehicle residency is a little unique compared to homelessness, unsheltered homelessness. I've described it as a circle. Half the circle is the funding and the outreach and the teams doing the work and the clients. The other half is the streets. The jurisdictions control the streets. In King County, we have 39 jurisdictions with 39 ways of making permutations to the RCW to control their streets. Some allow 72-hour stays without getting a ticket. Some require you move every 24 hours. So every city has its unique ways, and then the courts are unique in almost every jurisdiction as well. So getting those sectors aligned better is also part of our task as the vehicle residency work group, because the money that's being spent right now, and I just stopped directing an outreach team in January, and the money that was being spent on our outreach team was almost going 95% to remediating the sweeps, not getting people into housing. And so that's the tail wagging the dog's direction, you know, whatever that phrase is, completely making a mockery of the funding that's supposed to help people get out of vehicles into housing. We're finally making some headway with Seattle on that. We met with the Unified Care Team, which is the ones who form all that, with the mayor's office. I think they're beginning to finally understand that 80 outreach workers every week screaming about this may have some legitimacy. So I don't know for sure about how extensive the outreach is in Tacoma Pierce, but those are prime candidates to speak on your behalf for this establishment of something. The other thing is that most nonprofits, and Bellevue's offering a safe lot, and they're hardly able to find the safe lot for RVs, hardly able to find providers to take on managing it. And the reason is, for 20 years, nobody who's been a provider has ever done vehicle residency outreach. It's always been unsheltered homelessness, and everybody fits into the slots they've created, and everyone's a little afraid of taking on vehicle residency. So I think getting courage means being able to rest on some folks like me and others who will be there to help advise how to do it. The people are still homeless. They still need many of the same things that they need when they're not in a vehicle. And at the same time, when a city like Bellevue's, which this was a radical conversion, is actually giving money to start a safe lot for RVs. Those need to be followed up promptly, because now the public's going, well, who's gonna, I mean, I just ended up on TV the other day accidentally about the Bellevue safe lot. The reality is it's a great thing they're doing, and then when they can't find a provider, the public then interprets it, well, the plan is failing. I mean, we had Denny Westneat write a column last Sunday, we should get rid of the plan. I spent all day Sunday exchanging 8 emails with Denny Westneat saying, well, then what are we supposed to do, Denny? Yeah, let's throw out the plan and start where? Where would you suggest we start? We could send them to Tacoma. No, I never really said that. Anyway, the point ends up being that the public is just on a hair trigger, and the media is on a hair trigger. And all of us, in a way, are the voice of common sense. Who would have thunk, right? Looking at Tim Harris, who would have thunk you'd be the voice of common sense, Tim Harris? Anyway.
So Bill, I see a couple of folks on the call have their hands up with questions.
Yeah, I think rather than me rambling now, because it's a wide open field, but we have targeted a lot of stuff. And we've also included, let me just finish, the subcommittee we have also includes the business improvement areas and other folks like that, so that we're dealing with all the folks who are affected by RVs on the streets. That's our goal. So all those voices are part of our consistent messaging. In fact, I don't know that I sent it to you, Jeffrey, the letter we sent to the Seattle mayor's office and to council members, but those outline points that we have, and I'll make that available to you and you can share it. And it's been a template that we've been using, and it even includes amenity sites, which is a whole nother pathway for protocols and logistics. Anyway, so someone want to read me the questions, and that'd be easier than me.
Yeah, so a couple of people have their hands up, and the hand that's been up the longest is Omri. Go ahead.
Sorry, I apologize for not being on video this morning. A quick question: have you seen any private initiatives to try to tackle the situation? Let me be more explicit. Say that I had a 40-acre lot, piece of land sitting, I don't know, if you're talking about Pierce County, then Puyallup or somewhere in the area, not surrounded by too many other residents. What prevents anyone to take private initiatives to try and help people in RVs towards trying to solve or ding this problem?
Well, actually, nothing would prevent them except the local permitting. Mm-hmm. And if you fall under local permitting, you'd be taking the hard pathway. But if you were to align yourselves with faith communities as either partner or host, and you were then putting that land or property under the owned or governed by a faith community, you could follow up on the law Jeffrey and I got passed, 1754, 20,1920, which means there are rules already set out for doing safe parking in there. So any private owner could make use of that just by aligning with the faith community. And it's an end run around all the nasty permitting that would occur from meetings and citizens coming up and shouting at everybody, because it includes the option of an MOU with that owner between the jurisdiction and the owner. And that happened in Covington. They did an MOU. It avoided all the city council meetings, the screams that could have occurred, but that was just for a basic safe parking at a church. But the MOU feature in that law allows agreements to be made and things to move forward much faster than getting caught up in jurisdictional red tape. But it's not a bad idea, especially, I mean, I live in Auburn, and I'll tell you, I've driven by many sites that I'm going to start bringing into our conversations in the regional authority. And I think one of them is actually on hold for Muckleshoot to build an off-ramp from the freeway in about 10 years. But these are the kind of sites that could be used. The current site that they're using for RV safe lots in Seattle is owned by one of the owners of the Seattle Storm, who's relieved to finally get the lot being used for something constructive. So private sector ownership has been just ignored. So it's a great idea.
Can you, you mentioned some RCW or some where can I find out more about the escape clause of the faith-based
ESHB 2019-20 law 1754.
Sorry, ESB.
I do have the RCW number. You ready?
That works
Yes.
too.
Yeah, it's RCW 36.01.290.
Thank you very much. I want to look into that.
So that includes indoor shelter, outdoor encampments, safe parking, and tiny homes on religious property.
Right.
Oh, that's great, because there are initiatives in the Tacoma Ministry Alliance, which we're sort of involved with, and so yeah, thank you for the thread, and I'm going to pull on it. So thank you.
Great, and we have time for one more question. Mark, go ahead.
Yeah, just really quick. So, kind of cart before the horse here, but in terms of issues, number one, repairs on vehicles, upkeep, maintenance, is that anything that anyone's looked into in terms of, thinking about Bates Technical Institute? I know they have a wonderful automotive repair training there, along with issues that so many living in their RVs and cars face, registration. So if the registration has expired or there's parking liens or the like, is there any way to find some funding to get their registration current and maybe even insurance, or is that kind of outside the scope of what's being done?
So the current funded vehicle residency outreach in Seattle through the regional authority has money in the budget to do all that.
Oh, wow.
And we would, I've been to court 100 times with people, and now usually don't even have to go with them. I can just align and tell them where to go. The court here offers either a reduced payment plan or community service to work off tickets. And then as far as repairs, we always set a limit on how much, because so many of these vehicles are so old.
Yeah.
And we would go to, you'd probably already know some people are just pulling or pushing or having their vehicles towed to keep up with the movement requirements. We have bought I can remember buying parts that as much as $400. Sometimes they think they can put them in, but that is a difficult thing. And about the only reason we want to repair anything on the street is so they can keep moving to keep out of harm's way.
Right.
If they go into an RV safe lot, they're not going to have to keep up with the repairs in the same way. But yes, that is a big problem on the streets, and it's not like we can tow them to a repair shop and then tow them back out onto the street. Those are very expensive operations. So repair is a giant issue. And the condition of the RV is always a giant issue. Mold, leaks, all kinds of, keeping it warm in winter. And those are all realities that we constantly saw, and the current teams are dealing with that right now. But the way that the money came to the vehicle residency outreach from the regional authority allowed the team at the vehicle residency outreach to set the budget of how they wanted to spend it.
Excellent. Okay. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Pastor Carolyn Hackett and Jeffrey, for bringing this topic to us today. And I could tell we could easily spend more time talking about RVs and this issue and what we could do here in Pierce County. I look forward to, if you can forward that information to Jeffrey, that you can share it with the full coalition, I think would be really helpful as we try to pursue some solutions here in Tacoma and Pierce County.
Yeah, I know Jeffrey, I'll finish. Jeffrey and I have mentioned this around faith communities, but I think it would be wise for me to bring to our vehicle residency work group in King County that we, for the 4 counties from Snohomish down to Thurston, get together and talk about vehicle residency uniquely. Because these are more mobile than unsheltered, non-vehicle people. And we need to be able to approach the state on how it's going to help us with this. So I will just say that I will bring it to our end. You folks talk about who might represent you. And I think sometime in the next few months, we should have a conversation, hopefully together, or it could be Zoom, where we begin to get the state involved in this. And some of, Jeffrey and I know that there's a few people in the state who wanted to talk about this, and there's law that actually requires them to talk about this. but getting them to do it's going to take more muscle, like 4 counties. So thank you again for letting me share time with you today.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us. And Patricia, I do see you have your hand up. If you want to ask a quick question, we do need to get on to the next topic, but go ahead.
Just 2 things. Teresa asked something in the chat that I want to build to expand on with Chris Wilkinson's program. And second, in regards to Mark Adkins, sorry, when somebody's actually living in their vehicle and you take it to like Bates Technical College, they do not have their vehicle for like sometimes weeks. So like the consideration of trajectory, like in some of these volunteer programs is something to consider. And then it's a duality with the volunteer programs, because if they start working on what they think is one thing and it becomes more and more, it becomes difficult to mitigate that. Just speaking out that it has to be very, very clear what repairs will be and where they will go. Anyway, thank you for letting me share.
Hey, good to see you, Patricia. Well, sort of see you. Patricia and I cross paths in a lot of ways. In Seattle, they have Seattle Public Utilities started a program under Mayor Durkin that does clean out and pump out. And it was an ecological move, but it actually helps the people in the vehicles quite a bit. And I will send Chris's contact info to Jeffrey. And Chris is very engaging. He's very much an advocate, and he will explain what's going on. And so he's all over the city. And for a while, St. Vincent de Paul followed their effort and gave out, little bits of things that they could give out in the very brief amount of time they had. I don't know if that's continued or not, but I will send that information to Jeffrey, and it would be good. You could even invite Chris to be part of one of your meetings. He's really well-spoken on this and has good experience.
Thank you so much.
Bill. Thank you, Bill.
Good seeing all of you. Thank you.
See you soon, Bill.
All right.
Bye.
All right, so let's move on to our next topic. I'm happy to introduce Mindy McCoy from Rebuilding Hope. And I do want to let folks from our government partners know that we're going to be a little late doing that segment of the meeting because I don't want to cut short Mindy's presentation. Mindy, it's all yours.
Am I added as a host so I can share?
I will make you a co-host right now.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. And you should be able to do that now.
Okay, perfect. Okay, is it showing for everybody? This is my first time doing the slides and being a host in that perspective, so I apologize in advance.
It looks good. It's in the, so we're seeing your notes and everything. If you could click on the button to make it view as a slideshow.
Oh, yes.
Then we'll just see it in a larger format. And if you can't, that's okay too.
Yeah, just 1 second.
It might be under view.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, it's my first time, so
No problem. Yeah, there you go, slideshow. Perfect.
Great, thank you. Okay. So today, the Pierce County CSE Collaborative works together to end sexual violence. Today we have representatives from 3 of the great agencies to talk about the effects of sexual violence in multiple forms and the link to homelessness. So we're going to start with introductions. And my name is Mindy McCoy. I'm the community advocate for Rebuilding Hope. I also am a partner with CHIRP and I'm also the housing specialist, which It's why I attend the meetings weekly with everybody, just because it provides me an extra insight of how to be able to properly help my clients in different realms and to view the resources. Plus I'm new to Washington, so it gives me the opportunity to kind of network and kind of see in what ways I'm able to help as a community member. So I'm going to pass off to everybody to introduce yourself, but thank you for having me this morning, and I'm excited to be here.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm Kai Robinson. I'm the Deputy Director at Our Sister's House. I'm excited to share some more information about our agency and what CSC is. So I'll pass it to Amy.
Hi, everybody. I'm Amy McIntyre, and I am the Bilingual Victim Services Supervisor here at the Crystal Judson Family Justice Center. And also interested in sharing a little bit about what we do and our collaboration. Thanks.
So commercial sexual exploitation tends to be driven by two market forces, demand for sex from women and children by men, and the economic marginalization that tend to affect LGBTQ plus individuals, those with disabilities, those who are runaways, and those who do not have stable housing, and people of color. When Our Sister's House had their group home, we saw that between 1995 and 2003, 85% of girls had been commercially sexually exploited as children. And then we also saw that a majority of 90% of Black and Latina girls have been trafficked for sex because of unmet basic needs for food, shelter, and safety. Individuals who lack safe housing are more likely to engage in dangerous employment to meet their needs, which can make them vulnerable to CSC. When a survivor's basic needs, such as safe and affordable housing, are not met, then they have to find other ways to survive. And as data has shown that 1 in 5 youth who receive shelter services have actually experienced some form of commercial sexual exploitation.
So we're going to talk about the demographics of Rebuilding Hope, of survivors of Rebuilding Hope. And we have 450 numbers that represent the number of traffic victims. So that number kind of is a representation of traffic victims, not of all of the people that we serve at Rebuilding Hope. 12,144 hours of service provided between 2015 and 2020. 90% were female. Historically, we consider that females are the majority of the victims. They are not. There is that 7% that were male. It seems like a small number, but it's really a large number in the perspective of the world, you know, or of the, not the world, of the county. So it is a large number still, and you have to think it's also disproportionately shown because men are not reporting as often, and there's probably hindrance in there to their reporting. There's the 1% transgender, which are disproportionately shown as well. The number reflects the number of persons who just have reported, not of those who haven't been able to report it because of whatever hindrances, and their situation, and homelessness may be a factor. Also 11% were Hispanic and Latino. So the reason that we're doing this presentation today is to show how the sexual assault and how these populations intersect with homelessness are at risk of sexual exploitation, and the people of color and barriers in reporting. These slides represent the general population as general population versus the client served by Rebuilding Hope. This data is specific to STEP and the trafficking and exploitation program. Clients at Rebuilding Hope, but reflects similar data do not only are non-STEP advocacy clients, but also the most at risk experiencing homelessness. So during the pandemic, CSE, Rebuilding Hope, was a participating agency from Pierce County for the Center of Children and Youth Justice 2020 CSEC data report. Pierce County accounted for 12% of the referrals made last year. Be mindful that the mandatory reporters who can help identify and report CSEC were not in contact with youth during the pandemic, during the school closures. So the majority of the young people experiencing exploitation during the pandemic were unidentified. Throughout the state, 136 referrals were made in 2020, and the ages range from under 10 years old to the age of 24. The most common age of referral at CSEC of young people were 14 and 15 years old. occurring 22 and 23 times respectively. 36% of the youth reported experience homelessness, and 20% not being reported in school, but the enrollment status of 35% of young people is unknown still. Oops, sorry. And I think I'm passing it on to Amy.
Okay, I wasn't sure which part you wanted me to do. So
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, thank you.
That's fine, no problem. So there's a lot to the history of everything here in Pierce County, but the collaborative here, it's been really interesting. I've been part of this for a couple of years, and so the exploitation, and I just wanted to give like a little piece to this. So communicable sexual exploitation is kind of the inclusive and best term for sex trafficking because of the continuum that it really falls under, and exploitation and sexual violence falls under many different names. And so trafficking is one of them. And it intersects with a lot of the work we do. So we prefer to use that commercial sexual exploitation term. And it's not new to our county. It's not new to any part of our life, right? And like each of our programs serve survivors in our community. And so the Pierce County Collaborative was created this year to comprehensively address this issue of commercial sexual exploitation in our region, in our area. And it came to life because of all of our programs working with survivors of the commercial sexual exploitation, and we recognize that it needs a holistic and coordinated response that supports that community education and outreach, as well as direct support for survivors, and a collaboration that is professional and breaks down all of those silos and supports that no wrong door approach, and they can access services at any spot and get that holistic piece. Excuse me. And it's not just important, but it's also super necessary that we as a community, if we really want to address it, that we work together and provide that wraparound and that holistic approach. So I think you can go to the next slide. All right, so I just wanted to briefly go over what we do here at the Crystals and Family Justice Center. We generally provide services to survivors of intimate partner violence, but we also see that intersection of people that have partners who are also offending and who are oftentimes either pimping people out or coercing or forcing them to engage in sexual exploitation. And so the wheel that you see is kind of a breakdown, and it's meant to mirror the power and control wheel that we use as a DV education model. But these are the basic services we provide here through our agency. And so that includes like the majority of what we do is the one-on-one advocacy, which is confidential. But we have different types of legal aid that we get people connected to. We have on-site protection orders and referrals to Tacoma Pro Bono, as well as the Northwest Immigrant Rights Project. We work a lot with immigration to get them supported, because we know that runs pretty deeply with people who have immigrated. We work with the other side of our building has the prosecuting attorney's office and the sheriff's department, the DV units for them. So we have services there through the victim advocates for criminal justice support. We are starting up again a support group very soon, in about a month or so. And we're looking forward to adding more groups as well to just support people in their healing and their outlets, and really try to be more encouraging. We do have some financial services on site again. So we currently have DSHS once a week on site. And then we're looking forward to having child support services soon. We assist people with crime victims compensation. The majority of people that connect in either walk in or call our helpline. But we also do outreach. So we do cold calling outreach, as well as referrals for outreach to call out to people. And then we have emergency support services online, in person here. The majority of that looks like transportation assistance, emergency food and toiletries. We can get connected to shelter as available. And then we also have a really neat collaboration with a charity organization that helps with animal food and supplies, as well as some rehoming. And then we have 7 on-site partners and a ton of professionals that come and go at different times. We also have a specialized substance use disorder contract that we work with Multi-Care and have somebody outstationed there. So if you're interested in more of our services, just let me know and I put my information in the chat. And I'll turn it over to Kai.
And I'm going to tell you about our Sister's House. So our Sister's House is a culturally specific nonprofit domestic violence agency for African-American women and youth. But if anyone comes looking for our services, our programs, we do not turn them away. We help anyone who is interested in our services. We do provide domestic violence advocacy, legal advocacy, case management, mental health therapists, youth and adult life coaching, emergency assistance such as gas cards and food cards. And we have support groups. Our Sister Seeking Change support group is for survivors of domestic violence and victims of crime. And Stepping Stones is for children who have witnessed domestic violence. And then New Directions is for the youth who are actually initiating violence in the home. And then we have our teen dating violence program, Healthy Relationships, which is in the middle schools around Tacoma. And then we hold quarterly legal clinics for our clients so they can have one-on-one time with a lawyer to get some free legal advice. I would say one of our biggest clients' needs is housing. It can be help with moving costs, help finding housing, or rental assistance. When survivors are leaving an abusive relationship, one thing they need to do is find safe, affordable housing. And DV and homelessness intersect because when the survivors make the decision to leave that relationship, they are leaving the only housing access they have. And then what we're seeing is that the perpetrator is more than likely to be in control of the finances. And so the survivors typically have little to no income, which can lead them to sleeping in their car or couch surfing, are participating in CSE to make some money to actually, be in a safe and affordable house. And then we do have one advocate we call our housing specialist because she knows almost all the housing resources in Pierce County is in the process of finishing her CHIRP certification. Housing is an important need for our clients, and it is one thing we are actively trying to find more resources for and actively trying to change for the system. So I will pass it to Mindy.
Thank you. So let's talk a little bit about Rebuilding Hope and what we do. Rebuilding Hope Sexual Assault Center, Pierce County, is the only state accredited community sexual assault program. Services are confidential, empower-based, person-centered, and survivor-led. We serve primary and secondary victims, survivors. So the secondary victims, what that means, if it's a family member, a friend, a mom, a dad, a cousin, and they need to have some resources or have therapy, we help them as well. We have a 24/7 advocacy, crisis intervention, information referral, general, medical, and legal advocacy. We have trauma-informed sexual assault abuse therapy for ages 13 and up, but we also do provide resources if somebody calls in with somebody younger than 13. Prevention and community education. We also have our sex trafficking and exploitation program, which is our STEP program. And the STEP advocate will specialize in confidential, comprehensive wraparound case management with their clients that come in that are trafficked. Confirmed survivor at risk referrals ages 13 and up that we offer. We offer a non-judgmental environment, empowerment-based services that facilitate a client's self-determination and needs and goals. The clients don't ever age out, so you always have the opportunity if you're 13 or up to come back for services. It could be something that happened in the past and you're feeling traumatized by it now, and we offer for you to call and to receive services no matter what point in your life that you need therapy or assistance. We also support non-offending caregivers, parents, guardians, foster foster parents, and et cetera, to provide some supports for them as well and help them navigate the victim that they're helping navigate their trauma. And sometimes there's secondary trauma involved. So we offer that to them as well. And anybody that comes through as a STEP client does have access to any and all Rebuild and Hope's services that we offer. And we also have a monthly CSEC disciplinary and DT meeting that we have as well to kind of help provide more wraparound services for the STEP clients. I'm going to talk a little bit about Washington trafficking prevention. So Washington Trafficking Prevention is a grassroots survivor-led nonprofit dedicated to preventing human trafficking in Washington state by equipping the vulnerable and engaging communities. They offer 3 youth programs: Youth Educated Prevention Program for middle schoolers, Trafficking Prevention for high schoolers, and Empowerment U virtually for young people ages 13 to 17. They have 6 adult programs and offer online safety for families and parents, foster parents, caregivers, Human Trafficking 101 for community members, responding to CSEC 101 for educators, and responding to CSEC 101 for social workers, and human trafficking for medical professionals, and investigating human trafficking for law enforcement. They've been around since 2012, but they refocused to solely focus on preventing the crime of human trafficking, and they have reached about 3,644 reached since 2019. Awesome program or agency. Let me hand it off to Amy.
So the needs in our county here, so we definitely need to recognize that commercial sexual exploitation is a countywide issue that must be really robustly funded by the county. It really takes those collaborative efforts like our Pierce County CSE Collaborative, and they really should be funded and supported locally so that we can really support that holistic way of addressing exploitation. It's important that we prioritize funding effectively so that we can have effective and medically accurate sexual health and sexual violence prevention education and in different sections, right, in many different places. It's really important that the education piece happens both at the younger ages, but at the community-wide platform and among our community partners. I think that we have seen an increase in the people accessing our services as we keep working on this collaborative, and as people, as our county has invested in more funding. But I think that there's still a huge gap and there's still a huge need out there. And the more that we educate on what it looks like, what it could look like, how to properly screen, and how to properly assist people in accessing, the more that we're going to see and the more that we're going to help. Thank you, Mindy.
Thank you. So right now I'll put my information in the chat if anybody has any questions. I can't see them right now because I'm screen sharing, but once I stop screen sharing, I can maybe answer some questions or do some follow-ups through email. I'll put my information in the chat. But thank you for allowing us to share today. And it was a great privilege, and thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mindy and Kai and Amy, for being here today and for your patience since we ran a little late on the agenda. So I appreciate your flexibility. Is there any questions that folks would like to voice right now?
I see one that I've been chatting with a little bit with Carrie in the chat there that asked about kind of a DV percentage of DV households possibly being set aside at the state level, much like in New Jersey. I let Kai say if you've heard anything different. At the Washington state level, we do talk to the coalition, which does a lot of those policy pieces. And I haven't heard that there's going to be any changes or any implementations on that kind of percentage statewide. I think that would take a lot of policy work to get there. But there are a lot of individual programs across the state that do allocate certain percentages, and then they work with collaboratives like this to make sure that there are certain amounts of housing set aside and they screen pretty highly for DV. And I know that when people are in shelter, there is that that assistance that comes faster. But as far as like at the state level, anything being done policy-wise, I'm not aware of anything yet or currently. Kai, did you have any other different information on that?
Well, I think you answered that perfectly, Amy, because I haven't heard anything either.
Yeah, just a quick question, Amy, between Amy and Mindy, are you municipality or are you a nonprofit? What's the scope of, who are you under?
Yeah, so we actually sit in a very unique spot here in the Pierce County area for the Family Justice Center. We are funded by the county government, but we are run and operated much like a nonprofit. So we align with nonprofit values and operations, but we receive county and nonprofit funding. Hi.
Thank you.
And Patricia, I see you have your hand up.
Oh, I was going to let Kai answer her funding.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
Yes, we are nonprofit funding. We are mainly funded through grants, so that's how we get our funding.
And the same is for us as well. It's similar to Kai. We are a nonprofit and we do receive grants as well.
Manny, is your contact information on the chat here somewhere?
I will drop it now.
Thank you.
And go ahead, Patricia.
I'll try to be brief, but there was some overwhelming common themes that happen, particularly with domestic violence, in where the financial identity has been transferred usually to the male. And when the escape happens, or that is leaving with nothing, leading into homelessness, leading without financial identity. This leads, I'm just going to speak like in a traditional sense, a woman without resources as well as the children. And the other part of the theme that I wanted to promote was how some of the narratives or the illusions in life about women's financial identity needs to be spoken about, as well as rebuild through these processes of understanding what a financial identity means, even getting into housing when they run your credit checks. And if you don't have a job, or you were, a domestic partner and were like a homemaker, and these things need to change. And one of the first common themes, if this relationship had a car, is that women move into a car with their children. And this is the very sad reality of this. I speak as lived experience. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Patricia. And thank you.
I just wanted to add, like, if anybody is interested, we all do individual presentations too. So if you're interested in learning more about our like individual programs, I'm sure that I can speak for the two that like we love doing this and sharing more. So feel free to reach out.
Awesome, thank you. All right. So thank you again for sharing all this critical information. And I will offer the context of the a little bit of context related to the point in time count over the last few years, where domestic violence is often cited as one of the top 5 reasons that people have become homeless when we do the point in time count interviews. So there's a huge intersection, obviously. So that's why this information is so critical for us. So thank you. And Jay, go ahead.
Besides domestic violence as in a relationship stance, I think it's also important to understand that there is a level of expectation when you're a woman and you're homeless to give out, to be taken advantage of, to be used. And that is not prostitution. That is not domestic violence. That falls underneath a category where we are convinced that it is what we need to do, what we should do, and our best avenue sometimes in those positions. And that is a level of sexual abuse that is not discussed, where we psychologically believe we deserve it because we are not able And so there is so many levels to this that are not talked about or recognized of structures of abuse that are not seen or spoken of in our community that need to be relevant as well. Thank you.
I put in the chat the response, but I just wanted to say that does fall under the area of sexual coercion. And that is definitely one of the biggest reasons that we talk about it in the sexual exploitation realm instead of just trafficking, because it does look a lot different for different reasons in different areas of life. But it does still speak to people being exploited.
Thank you again. All right, so let's shift to our regular updates from government partners. And I'm not sure how many are still on the line. Typically we do this around 10. I know that the city of Tacoma was not going to have a representative in the meeting this morning. So there's no updates from the city. Do we have anybody from Pierce County Human Services on the call?
Yeah, this is Jeff, and I have no
Hi, Jeff.
updates, but I believe Valerie's still on the call and she may have an update, I'm sure.
Thank you, Jeff.
Good morning. So the prevention RFP closes today, 2 p.m. Do not be late. We can't accept anything that's past due, up to $2 million to serve prevention services. So I encourage folks to make sure you submit on time. And for the folks who are submitting applications, partners, support them in getting it done on time. Other than that, everything else is going great. And I hope everybody has a good weekend and honors Memorial Day appropriately.
Thank you, Valerie. And let's see, do we have anybody from the Tacoma Pierce County Health Department on the line who has an update?
Yeah, I am here. Jenny had to take off a little bit early. And yeah, it is a mouthful, Tacoma Pierce County Health Department. I don't know why we don't condense it, but whatever, I don't make the rules. Yeah, the biggest thing that I have for folks, if they're interested, is some data from the last heat event from May 12th through to May 19th. So just, yeah, just to preface it again, that this is just a rough estimate. So these are probably on the lower end in terms of the actual numbers, but you know, we're going to work with what we have here. So just for context, the National Weather Service identified that as a orange heat level event starting on May 12th, which launched our own system to activate to gather some data. So a total, we saw 21 heat-related injuries that people went into the ED or urgent care. And none of them were identified as being unhoused. And just for context, for someone to be identified unhoused in the system, it has to be identified by the provider. So the nurse or the doctor or whoever is on staff has to, it's a visual indication. Of course, that is flawed, but that's the system that they use. So none were identified as being unhoused. 21 went in to receive care here in Pierce County. We saw the highest on May 14th with a number of 8 people going into services. Most of the other days we saw less than 5. And so when less than 5 are indicated in the system, that's when things start to get a little tricky. The system does not really start tracking until it reaches a certain threshold. But we did see that most of the people that were going in were male between the ages of 18 and 44 and female between the ages of 45 and 64, with a majority of the visits originating in central Tacoma or Bonnie Lake, Buckley / Lake Taps, which is a pretty broad demographic area. So I'm not sure how they broke that down, but I can get some more information on that if folks are curious. And it breaks down further. So we have 3 for smoke, 2 for drowning, 4 for boating, and there were 0 deaths. Of course, the medical examiner might come out and say there were some deaths. Of course, this is really early on, but that's what we have so far. So from what you know right now, no one died during that heat event. So yeah, that's what I have for some folks. I'm happy to repeat some of that or share some of that in the chat. I know it's a little bit confusing sometimes, but I will be here for the next few minutes if folks have questions.
Thank you, Isaiah. And we do appreciate getting even though it's early and not 100% complete, it's useful to have that information shared here. Any questions for Isaiah before we move on? All right, there was a question from Dr. Jarvie for Jeff and or Valerie. Go ahead, Dr. Jarvie.
Hi, Jeff or Valerie. Do you guys have any information about the previous funding applications? We were told we would hear back in May and we haven't yet. And I need to know because I'm going into a board meeting today. Thanks.
Yes, those decisions are still under consideration. We hope to have an announcement very, very, very soon.
Thanks, Jeff. All right. So let's see, we're at 10:31. This week, Timothy took a break from compiling the notes from last week's chat. I don't know if you want to say anything about that, Timothy.
Yeah, the notes last week were just a little bit thin. That happens sometimes, and there wasn't really a lot of point in assembling. So just a reminder that to have note takers in our groups and throw them up, and every once in a while, if we just sometimes the topic just lends itself to small group discussion that's unfocused, and if we want to skip the notes sometimes, that's okay too. This call has been really, really rich on the information flow, so I'm going to capture all that in the notes and resources part, even if nothing happens in the discussion groups. So there we go.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you for that reminder, Timothy. And what we do want to do now is shift over to having a breakout conversation. And we're going to base this breakout conversation on the presentation we just had regarding trafficking and sexual exploitation. I do want to recognize, and I should have said this earlier, this topic I know can be traumatizing for some folks. And so if you want to sit out doing the breakout conversation on this topic today, that's completely understandable. But I do want to spend the next 10 minutes for folks to consider what intersections they see between sexual assault, trafficking, and domestic violence with homelessness here in Pierce County. So I'm going to put us in small breakout rooms. And again, the reminder is for someone to take notes in your breakout, so that you can paste them in the chat when we come back here. I'm going to set up 5 breakout rooms, and appreciate, we will come back here at, I'll do it at 10:45. All right, away we go. You know the routine. Everyone, this is the part of the meeting where I get to see everybody's cameras on. I love it. All right, if you are the person tasked with taking notes in your breakout room, please take a moment to paste those into the chat so that Timothy can do his magic. And hopefully that was a good conversation. It was a little bit shorter than we usually do, but hopefully that was enough time to have a meaningful conversation and to network a little bit, which is the dual purpose of these breakout conversations. We have 14 minutes left in today's meeting, so let's shift over to, I was going to do advocacy updates. I'm going to skip that. And I know Jan had to step away, so she doesn't have time to give an update for Safe Sites for All. I will let folks know that I believe we're still going to meet on Monday at noon, even though it is a holiday. So you can find the link to that noon meeting on Monday on the pchomeless.org if you have an interest in joining. And again, the Safe Sites for All meeting focuses on just what's in the name, safe sites as well as safe parking. So we'd love to see you there. Any committee updates we need to share today, Rosemary? No?
Nothing particular right now.
Okay. Very good. So that means that we have some time for good trouble announcements and any success stories that folks would like to share. I'll open up with the first good trouble announcement, and that is that on June 1st. So the first Thursday of every month, we hold our coalition social get together. This next week, the first of the month is actually the first Thursday. So the meeting will be, the social hour will be held at 7 C's in downtown Tacoma, 7 C's Brewing. I noticed that the website pchomeless.org has not been updated yet to include the location, so I'll fix that right after the meeting. But that social hour takes place starting at 4 p.m. next Thursday, so we hope that folks can join. And let's see, Patricia, you have your hand up.
I just was gonna just ask people to put in the chat, like any resources that are available for unhoused or low income, as well as any events that are happening through Memorial Weekend. I thought that would be I wanted to use that request. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Patricia. And Berna, go ahead. Oh, need to step away?
No, it's my, when I swing my mouse one way, a screen comes up and then I can't hit unmute, so I apologize. I wanted to do a shout out to Timothy Harris and Jay Worley. I have seen them in action and at Veterans Village, Fob Hope in Tacoma, and they were just so impressive. Timothy's homemade bagels were a super big hit, and Jay had veterans knitting and doing all kind, I mean, like several different wood burning, and let me see, there was another one working on little wooden boxes and things like that they could decorate themselves, and they were really engaged and involved, and both Jay and Timothy are very easy people to be around. So I just wanted to say thank you to both of you guys.
Thanks, Berna. And Jay, speak of the devil.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Berna. It's been good. That was our second time with FOB, and we're gonna shift over to Tuesdays and probably be there pretty much every week, at least once a week. There'll be days that we miss, but that's how life is. But things that we could definitely use, though, to be honest, if anybody is willing to donate items outside of the ones who already have, because they've been amazing and have helped incredibly, is the oddest things that you would imagine. Paint. We have one person who needs a dark grid paper notebook, if possible. Things like that are very uncommon that you see, but you'd be like, hey, wow, that's a specialty item that somebody can stick in their pocket and do something with. But it's been good. And we're getting a lot of positive feedback from the veterans there, and they're able to talk and really work through some things. And some of them have some skills that we can really help them build into jobs for themselves if we take the time to do it. So there's good progress there. Also, went to Recovery Cafe last week, their open house, and they're down on 1321 MLK, and they're amazing. Really astonishing BIPOC community support group, and they really could use some of our support, and they're really, really amazing. So just shout out to them and the work that they do. A lot of PTSD, a lot of recovery that we don't usually discuss. It's good to see them there. Thank you.
Thank you, Jay.
Thank you, Jay.
Anyone else with items they'd like to share with the 37 of us who are still in the room?
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Hey, I've been approached by a couple of organizations, nonprofits. They're small, and like everybody else, they're having some funding challenges. I would love to help them. Where can one learn about the funding cycles, whether it's municipality or state, to basically handhold those organizations and try to get them funding?
So a couple things I'll mention. Pierce County is contracting with a group called 501 Commons that is their part of their contract is supposed to be providing that kind of support to small nonprofits that have an interest in submitting applications for funding with the county. So I would suggest that as a Googling 501 Commons to see what they currently have publicly offered there. And otherwise, a lot of the advice would be to both the city and the county have pages on their websites that offer regular updates of when notices of funding availability are available or when they're requesting requests for proposals. So it becomes a process of monitoring those. That would be a place to start. Anything else you would add, Sally? No? Okay.
Thank you.
I mean, the only other thing I would say is if these nonprofits have a specific area of expertise tracking that their issue at the county level, the meeting where the committees talk about programs, they frequently end up talking about funding opportunities that are coming up. And that's a good way to get an early warning that an RFP or NOFA process is going to be coming soon.
Yeah, it makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah. Courtney?
If Alan is still here, I'd love to hear from him about last night's meeting. And I'd love to hear about the North Slope meeting. I did make it to the Holy Rosary meeting, and I thought it was very effective. It was low turnout, but a turnout of 2, half the crowd was supportive of it. So, I think some good conversation came out between lived experience in the city in that meeting. A good idea from the conversation evolved from that last night too. So, and I'd rather have Caleb talk about that. So I'll leave that for him sometime.
Got it. And glad to hear, Courtney, you were able to attend that meeting. For folks who aren't aware, there were about 4 community meetings that took place last night at various places around the city. So I'm not surprised that people were spread thin. Because there was a home in Tacoma meeting in Northeast Tacoma. There was the North Slope community meeting with the topic of homelessness, the Holy Rosary meeting, and then a little bit earlier in the day, there was the meeting with the Community Vitality and Safety Committee of the City Council talking about rental regulations and the Renters' Bill of Rights. So a lot going on. Mark?
Yeah, just really quick on Marcus's question. I think it was Marcus, was the funding. I just put it in the chat. Association of Fundraising Professionals. There's in Tacoma. There's always great people there that can answer questions about additional sources of income or finding people to help them review or write a grant. So those are good. They're a good organization.
Thank you, Mark. And Marcus, I see you have your hand up.
Thank you, Rob. Yes, last week, Friday. So we had our open house. And thank you, Tim and Jay, for stopping in. And some of the others of you who are on here came by. If I start naming everybody for community support, we here at Tacoma Recovery Center, we provide recovery peer support, recovery support groups, housing resources, employment resources, veteran services, PTSD support group, women and men support group, meditation, acupuncture. For those who become members, we provide a free lunch Tuesday through Friday. recovery coach. I don't want to belabor the time to try to explain everything, but we're in a new facility. We had a nice kickoff last Friday, open house. Court personnel came, county, city. It was well attended. Thank you, everyone, for your support.
Yeah, thank you for all that you're doing in the community. All right, so it looks like we are close to the end of our time. Anybody with a last item they want to share before we wrap up this morning's meeting? All right, I'm not seeing anybody jumping up. So thank you, everyone. I hope, oh, go ahead.
I just want to remember that our freedoms were given by lives, and that's why Memorial Day exists. So thank you.
Thank you, Patricia. And that's a great way to wrap up our regular meeting for this week. Thank you to everyone for attending. I hope everyone has a safe weekend, and we will see you all back here next Friday. If you have an interest in helping plan next Friday's meeting, we will hold a planning session here on this same Zoom in about 5 minutes. So to everyone else, be safe. See you next week.
And then cool.